it's your turn.
This is mine. This is yours.
It's your turn to speak.
Okay, yeah, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. So we have a couple really cool guests. I would consider myself a fanboy of the video series that they actually put together. High-resolution video series. Bobby Ghoshal and Jared Erondu have put together a fantastic series of interviews with 25 masters in design. Before we have them come on stage, I want to show you a quick clip of one of the interviews that they've done. So,
if you could just dive into the muscle.
Yeah.
So that's the first time I'm hearing that word being used to describe, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Do you mean that it is does everyone exercise that muscle, right? Or do the designers exercise it, but with other kind of people around them? Like, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly great designers, what they do is they bring a design consciousness or design thinking into an organization. But I think the secret is to make people aware that they too can do great design. And we're all designers, right? So I always say, like, you are a designer, whether you choose to do it or not is a separate issue. But right now, your non-decisions or your non-design decisions are themselves designed decisions. So let's all be aware that we are all, even if you're the CFO, you are making decisions that influence the customer experience or the user experience. Therefore, you are designing what this company does and how it shows up to the world. What I think design thinking allows you to do is have a new level of consciousness about that. And to say, I'm actually going to learn how to do this in a way that de-risks go-to-market, that involves our user in a smarter way, that prototypes and iterates and tries and fails and gets feedback and then goes to market. That's just, for me, smart business. It happens to be called design, but I think even the most backward-looking CEO can get behind that as an idea that, I would like to de-risk going to market. Actually, design is a wonderful way to do that. And that is what a designer can bring to the table. That's why I think it's so important that they don't show up as if they are magic fairies that do something beautiful in the corner and they make my work look beautiful. That's not design at all, in my opinion. It might be corporate identity or it might be graphic work, but true design is about bringing an organization, rallying an organization around this idea that we are going to follow certain principles as we develop new ideas and as we grow as a company.
So quick question, who here in the audience has seen the video series?
That's pretty good.
Pretty good. So we have Bobby Ghoshal. He is the co-founder and chief design officer of Candid. We have Jared Erondu. He is the head of design for Lattice. Come on up, guys.
So now again, which one of you is Bobby and which one of you is Jared?
I will say, I've been to 2 conferences in the last 2 weeks, and only 3 hands go up in those conferences, and this was a nice little surprise, I will say.
Well, welcome, guys. So Bobby, you're an ex-San Diegan, right? You left San Diego. You know, one of my first questions is why'd you leave? Because this is an amazing place, and I think design is becoming more important here. So what's the gap and the difference between then and now?
I mean, I think design generally is not a San Diego thing per se. I think it's evolving across the spectrum of people working in the field. I didn't leave specifically for a design reason. I had a company that I founded in San Diego about 7 years ago, and we were just being outcompeted. You know, all our clients were on the East Coast, all our competitors were in the Bay Area. The VC money was spread between the two.
So why is that not a design issue?
Well, sorry, it wasn't a design issue that I could control.
Yeah, but that's the issue
I was
that we're
focused
facing.
on my company.
And the reason that we brought you here, the reason we brought this audience together was to solve that problem.
Yes. Who solved this problem here today? All of us. Come on. Yeah.
So, are you coming back to San Diego?
I've been. See, he's making fun of me, but the thing is, my heart has never left San Diego. Last night I walked in. We got out the airport. By the way, landing in San Diego airport. If you guys don't fly around much, anyone that's from out of town, will notice all the beautiful palm trees, like perfectly, pristinely laid out for you, the small little airport that's pretty to walk through. All of that stuff is designed to make you miss San Diego when you take off and leave. And so, like, when I come back to San Diego, the first thing I do, you know, there are a couple of people that I used to work with back in the day in the audience. The first thing I do is I walk to all the places I used to spend time at, because my heart is still here. I want to come back here. You know, New York is cool, but San Diego is probably where I'll retire. I have been.
Wrong answer.
That's a while.
Back up.
Yeah.
Let's try that again. What would it take so that you would come to San Diego now, and not when you retire?
Yeah.
Jared, you're allowed to give an answer too.
Yeah.
Jared, you're not going to.
I don't live here, so.
Well, why not?
There is
one day.
all I will say is there is a very high chance that I'll probably move back to San Diego within the next 2 years. Within the next 2 years is my within the next 2 years. This is my commitment. I'm looking into it. But we and this conference is going to be on its fourth leg, right?
So it's interesting. You know, if I look at the films that you made, it took two of you.
Yes.
But what you did, which was kind of nice, was that you let them speak for themselves. Now notice it takes two of us, and we're not letting you speak at all, right?
That's because you're a better interviewer than we are.
But it's for a different reason, too. Because there you wanted people to voice, well, what they feel design is about and how they approach it. Whereas what we're trying to do is build a successful design community in San Diego, and we want you to help.
You guilting me on stage right now?
Yeah.
What a master.
This is completely off script.
I'm in.
Yeah, I was asked beforehand. We made up this wonderful story of how we would ask questions, and you asked me, Jared, would we stick to the story? And I said, no.
Yeah.
So I did stick to that story. That is, I didn't stick to the story. That's sticking to the story, right?
That's fair.
Yeah, that's very true.
So tell us a little bit about high resolution. I'm going to get back on track.
Okay,
here.
cool.
So,
Cool, awesome.
See, this is how it works. So
That's his job, to keep us on track.
Right. So you guys came together. You came up with this idea. There's a lot of video series out there. Sure. There's great talks to founders, to different people. What was missing? What were you trying to solve when you created this?
Yeah. So Bobby and I have known each other for 7 years now. The company that he was talking about, Flood, back in the day, at that time, I was a tech journalist. And I reached out to Bobby and I was like, hey, you know, you're building an app that pertains to news. I'm pretty interested. Can I cover it? And we did, and that's how we first met each other. And then we realized that we both had family in Maryland. We happened to be in Maryland at the same time. We got coffee at Panera Bread. And since then, we've been BFFFs. And I think on average, about once a month, Bobby and I get on a phone call and we just rant and we just talk shit. Just a lot of shit.
Are we allowed to cuss?
Yeah.
Shit. Just get it all out. And like last year, probably like end of summer, beginning of fall or so, we had a pretty interesting phone call. So at the time, Bobby was head of design at WeWork, and I had just left my role at head of design at Teespring. And we were talking about a challenge that we both faced in recruiting and trying to bring designers into our organizations. And we identified two problems. The first one was that there were a lot of designers coming out of schools, not actually understanding the value of design and what they're supposed to do at a business when they join a company. The second problem was that companies, in turn, did not understand design and value it. And if they had design as a presence, they either underpaid them, underutilized them, or both. Or they did not have design to begin with. And this was one of many rants. We've done many things. We've ranted about football, soccer, and then this, right? And we decided, of all these things, we're going to do something about this one. And we're going to treat it like a problem, and we're going to solve it with design. And, you know, I had done a podcast years ago, and Bobby was like, you know, we should just talk about this. Let's go find really, really fucking smart. That's an actual swear, so I'll just drop that. We'll go find really smart people and ask them, hey, what is design? How should a designer actually pitch the value of design to their organizations, and what should organizations start doing right now? And that's how it started. And at first it was going to be a podcast, just audio, and then we realized if we wanted this thing to really stand out and separate itself from all the other podcasts that existed, it needed like some more gravitas, and that's why we picked video. And we settled on the number 25. One of my favorite shows is 24, and we just went one number up. We were thinking about dropping it all at once. I don't know, maybe. That sounds cool. Let's go with that. So We were originally thinking about dropping it all at once, like a Netflix series, and just having people binge watch it. Then we realized that would have been terrible for marketing. But yeah, that's how we started the series.
So one of the things that you said is it's designers aren't educated. You know, the education system is failing us, right? On one side, no offense, UCSD. So on the other side, but they're doing something about it. The other side is, right, the corporations, right, that don't necessarily get it and have that. So which is the bigger problem?
Honestly, I would say the first, because the onus is on us to change the narrative. Companies will buy into design if they see a reason to buy into design, right? So obviously we can educate them and talk to them, but the best way to do it is just by showing them.
Actually, I have a different view.
Okay.
It's not the educational system. By the way, I dislike our educational system. That's not an issue. I think it's designers' fault. Designers don't know how to explain the value of design. But designers love to tell with their companies, says, oh, the beautiful work I do, and look at the prices I get, and how customers like it. Well, you tell that to your boss or your boss's boss, and your boss's boss say, well, yeah, that's why we've hired you. Now, excuse me, I have to go back to work. Mm-hmm. What you want to do is be able to say why we can make a difference in your business. And you've got to learn human-centered design, folks. That means understand your customer. And who's your customer? It's your boss's boss.
There are two moments in the series that quickly touch on just basically the point that you're making now. The first is in Phil Gilbert's. By the way, how good was Phil Gilbert's keynote? Was everyone here? I mean, I haven't taken that many photos in a keynote. You know, so many slides that were just so tactical and nice. But in his interview, he talks about a story with Paul Rand where I don't know if it was him that was talking to Paul Rand or not, but Paul Rand essentially asks, "What is design?" And the answer that the other person gives is some mumbo jumbo, and Paul stops them and says, "Design is about relationships." Right? And that was a very interesting moment because the bigger idea is not necessarily just the relationship of a person to a person, but it's the relationship of a business to its customer, the designer to the product, people inside of a company, the customer to the product. There's all of these areas where relationships intersect. And it's very interesting to think about design in those terms. And then in another part of the interview, we speak to John Maeda. And in every episode, we open every episode with the same question. What's one thing about design that's clear to you that's not clear to other people? And 24 out of 25 guests gave us a very verbose, precise, nice answer. And we were not prepared for John's answer, which was a 2-second answer. And I mean, if you watch the episode, you actually hear us ruffling our papers around because we weren't prepared for a follow-up question. And John basically says, design is not just about the user, it's about the customer. And I didn't, in that moment, entirely get what he was saying. It took me a solid week of editing the video and watching it again to realize the point you just made, which is, we talk about UX a lot. And of course, a lot of gratitude goes your way there. I mean, you've done a lot in the UX field, but it's very clear designers have abused the term UX to be, one small sliver of what we now call product design, or we talk about websites and apps. But of course, when you think about a customer, you're thinking about everything, the preconditions that lead to them before they ever get to the product, all the questions that they ask themselves. Is this worth it? Can I afford it? Is this for me? Do I know someone that's used it? Is this any good? Right? There are all these questions that, frankly, business people answer. Designers tend not to answer those questions. And then you go back to the whole relationship mentality. And designers' job in that moment inside the company is to have that social currency to be able to influence answers to those questions so that when you're speaking to the CFO and or the finance person and they come up with a pricing strategy, you can guide them through the lens of the user. You could do the same thing with the salesperson when they figure out what language to use on the site, or the marketing person, or the support people who are talking on the phone with upset customers. Design's job is to bring that lens of the user into those internal conversations to influence those outcomes. Not necessarily that those outcomes fall to the auspices of design per se, but that we can influence them.
That was brilliant, because I was just about to interrupt you and say, you aren't answering the question.
Okay.
And then you changed.
Yes.
And you answered the question.
Oh, it was a long thread, but I kept pulling.
Yeah, you kept going.
Yeah.
Good thing my attention span was long enough.
Thank you, Don.
But that is the point, that when first of all, most designers never get a chance to talk to the CFO, and most designers, in fact, would say, me talk to the CFO? Duh, that's not my job. Why would I want to do that? He's a dull person. No, the CFO, plays a really important role, and when you talk to the CFO, you better understand your CFO, which means they're talking about money. And because if you're, look, I was at Apple in the exciting period. We made exciting products, but our sales were tanking all the time, and that's where the CFO becomes important. It doesn't matter how brilliant your work is. If you're losing money, you're going out of business. And so learn how to talk about that. And if you're talking to the service people, you have to talk a different language. And but in the old days, designers did that. In the old days, designers would tell the owner of the company, you have to build a new building in order to do these designs, or you have to completely change your strategy, and they got away with it. And they, in part because they came from theater, and theater always thinks big. They want to completely redesign the whole stage in order to do a little thing. Why don't we do that? What happened to us? Why are we so meek and mild? What did you learn from all these interviews that might, so who, you said that John threw a wrench into your plans. Yeah. Who else did?
I think Andrea Mallard, the person who was in the clip right before we came on stage, threw a wrench for me. It was something I believed, but she articulated it so well. In that preview, she said that we're all designers. And I know there's some sensitivity to that. Like there's some people who say then, like it takes something away from them. They're like, no, I'm a designer and everyone else is a non-designer. Or some people are like, oh, I lost sense of creativity, I'm not a designer. But when she said that your non-design decisions are themselves design decisions, that really struck a chord with me. Because, you know, she was talking to the non-designers in that sense, but she was also talking to designers. I noticed at some companies where designers feel like their problem is only the interface. And, you know, we're kind of going on the same thread of like, you know, the experience is everything from the time someone discovers your product to the time they leave. But for me, that lesson was very profound, and it's something that I took back to the company I currently work at. You know, we were talking, so I work at Lattice, and Lattice is working in performance management. We're building tools for helping companies grow their employees, define goals, and all that different stuff. And because we are B2B, a very big portion of our company is our sales org. And you know, when I joined Lattice and I started working on our challenges, a lot of the stuff I was working on was UI, like the tool that the customer would get once they bought it. And after that interview, like it just reminded me like, oh shit, there's so much stuff that happens before they ever use the product. And user experience, which is interesting, assumes that they're using your product already. That's not necessarily the case, right? There's a whole discovery period before they even decide to put down $1. And I started looking like, okay, outside of the UI, what is something very important that I can actually combat in this company? And I looked at our sales department, and you know, I was starting to think about what are some challenges that design can address. And one of the biggest things in B2B, of course, is how long, like the average deal cycle, how long from a customer or potential customer discovering your product to the time that they actually sign on. And some companies have an average, maybe it's 20 days, 40 days, whatever it is. And you can see that as a problem. Like if it's 40 days and you want to cut it down to 20, and there's a clear business impact as to why you would want to do that, how would you approach that, right? And it's like, okay, you know, I'm a designer, but this isn't UI. How would I do this thing? But if you take one level back of abstraction and you look at the process, I think Facebook codifies this really well. They say understand, identify, execute. That's their summary of a designer's process. So if you're looking at this problem, you want to understand it. Okay, why does it take 40 days? Maybe that's actually really good and there's nothing to do here. Or maybe it's really bad. Why is it bad? What are our sales representatives saying in those first calls? What are the artifacts that they're sharing? Are they redundant? Can some of these things be codified? Then you start iterating, right? And you start identifying opportunities of improving that. And then you execute. Maybe execution is a sales deck. Maybe it's a website. Maybe it's an app. Maybe it's a conversation. Maybe it's removing something from the process. But when she said your non-design decisions are themselves design decisions, that's when it struck me. It's like, well, if I'm not approaching that, that is my decision. And the outcome of that, I decided.
You know, you need 25 is too little. You need number 26. And number 26 should be the two of you about the lessons that you have learned from listening. And there was a good beginning.
I have good news. We did that episode. I'm going to send you a link. I'm going to send you a link after this.
Yeah. That was technically episode 25. We did 24 guests, but you should be our 25th.
So I just admitted I didn't see you.
There we go.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So Bobby, you're a co-founder, right?
Yes.
You know, so why would a designer want to be a co-founder? What are the values that a designer brings that maybe a non-designer, traditionally trained designer, bring to the table in founding a company or doing a startup in this way? So I'm curious, and did your perspective change through these 25 interviews?
Yeah, so I left WeWork in January of this year. Does everyone here know what WeWork is? Yeah, okay, a lot of head nods, great. Yes, WeWork, it's a great company. I left WeWork in January to do.
More people don't know what it means to do, so you better tell them.
Well, okay, so WeWork is the sixth most valuable private company in the country, along with Airbnb and Uber and some others. And their entire offer or value, their USP, is they design really beautiful spaces, saddle it with very powerful technology to give any small business a competitive advantage inside of these co-working spaces. So people tend to think of WeWork as a real estate company. It's really a technology company that uses real estate to drive social value by getting companies to work next to each other and bright people to collaborate with each other.
It sounds amazing. Why'd you leave?
Well, I left to do this show. It was that important to me. It's something Jared and I wanted to do. I think the timing was right. It felt right. And I frankly started getting the urge to want to do my own company again. To answer your question, Candid offers basically Invisalign at 65% less cost, sometimes 70% less cost. And the way we do that is we go direct to consumer. It's all designed by orthodontists, prescribed by orthodontists. But what you end up doing is you take this, $10, $15 billion market or $20 billion market, and you increase access by dropping the cost of care. You increase access and you flood the market with people who've never before been able to afford orthodontia. And typically people that can't afford orthodontia need orthodontic care. And so, it was a beautiful human problem in the healthcare space with an amazing business model, and that was the second thing that was really important to me. I don't believe good design, the way we think about design now, I don't believe good design solves a bad business model. If your company doesn't have a business model, your beautiful product's not gonna push the needle. I think you need to reframe what you do inside of that company to fix the business model. But a lot of times designers don't understand that, and they don't do that. And so for me, it was really important that the business model was thought about from the very beginning, and Candid had that in spades. And then what I do believe, though, is a company with a good business model, when you saddle design to it, right, the roots of design, what design actually is. You think about the human problems, and you connect with human beings, and you design products for people, not just for yourself, then you start to really change lives, and you start to impact lives. And I knew how to do that at Candid. And I saw this opportunity that, and there were some other market forces. Invisalign's patents rolled off October 8th. We knew the supply was gonna go up. We knew the demand was there. We knew that we could 4, 5, 6x the market size. And we knew that we could help a lot of people. So that's why I was very interested in co-founding the company. And by the way, the other business partners are all business people, like product, finance, lawyers, like really, really strong in their fields. And they needed a designer's touch, I think.
So one of the questions you ask quite often, I think it's a community question, is if you're a solo designer in a company, how do you communicate the value of design, and how do you go about it? And so I'm curious on both your perspectives on what does that look like? If you're in that solo designer position, you're a co-founder, but so you have some influence. But still, if you're a solo designer somewhere, what can you do to advocate for more design as a process and a system?
Sure. So I've been a solo designer many times. At Lattice, I was. I started my first full-time design role was at a company called Omada Health, where I was also first designer. And I got a little lucky there because the founders came from IDEO, so they definitely understood this. But I was still the only person actually practicing. So what I've come to realize with being the only designer in an organization is that it can feel like a burden because there's so much that you want to do. You see all the problems, whether it's within the organization, the product, your go-to-market strategy. And oftentimes it comes down to ruthless prioritization, just deciding what you need to do right now. And the best way to do that is by understanding the business, right? And what I see a lot of designers do is they get to that point. They know all the things that they can do. and they know that they're the only designer that can do it. So they prioritize those things, but they don't have any way of prioritizing. They just list them. Like, okay, I'm gonna start on the logo, but why? I'm gonna start on the marketing page, but why? And then when they come to the founder or whoever's in leadership, whether it's the stakeholder, the CEO, CTO, whatever it is, and they ask them, let's do this thing first, they're oftentimes rejected. And the reason why is because they're not making a business case, right? I found that if a designer is able to make a business case, and in order to make a business case, you need to understand the business and all its metrics, then you are actually going to be allowed to do the thing that you need to do. And then when that thing gets out into the world and the rest of your company sees the impact, that's a very strong way to move design forward, right? If design is a process for solving problems, and at the heart of it is understanding the people who you need to solve that problem for, then if you're able to solve that problem and you're able to open up and make that process very transparent, then the company will obviously want to buy in, because at the end of the day, the company wants to survive. And if you're doing things that help that company survive, whether it's growing revenue, growing users, whatever it is, they'll be like, hey Jared, or hey Don, or hey Bobby, like that thing you're doing, keep doing that thing, right? But I think, like I said, it starts with understanding the business and then opening up your process. It's very easy when you're the only designer to kind of like silo yourself. Go into a corner, do your thing, do your little magic stuff, and then come out with this thing, and then it just gets slapped down and rejected, right? If you're opening up that process and you're getting buy-in because you understood the business, that is a very strong way to move forward.
You know, I can't resist. I'm a professor, see, so I now have to give a little lesson. Because, no, what you said was brilliant, but it doesn't just reflect design. Every single profession has the same problem. Every single profession complains. I'm the only engineer in the company. I'm the only marketing person in the company. I'm the only person who understands sales. I'm the only person who understands finance, et cetera, et cetera. And it isn't. Designers seem to think they're special. You guys are not special. And what is really needed in every company is exactly what you described, which is someone who steps back and sees the big picture. And if you step back and see the big picture and you can describe it in terms of the rest of the company, then you have power.
Yeah.
And it's not because you're a designer or an engineer or a marketing person, it's because you look at the big picture. And let me tell you, it is rare to find those people in companies. Actually, it's rare to find those people in any, in any field. It's amazing how many scientists I know who only see their narrow little picture, and how many physicians I know who are specialists, and when you go to see them, they don't see you as a person, they see you as their specialty. Oh, I see, yeah, here's the 13 drugs you ought to take. And so look at the big picture. That was a wonderful description. But, none of this but stuff, and you can expand it to apply to everybody, not just design.
You know, coming back to the transparency piece, how many of you have heard about Google Ventures or GV's design sprint? Okay, now keep your hands up, put them back up. How many of you have actually ran one at your company? Okay, of the people who, are those all the hands down? Is there any hands still up?
Hand up.
One hand up?
2, 3.
Okay, was it well received at your company? Not initially. Did it eventually? Why? What changed? It worked. Okay. Okay.
I can't
So
hear it.
Can you repeat the? Yeah.
he said not initially. It worked eventually, and just getting people engaged was not enough.
So getting engaged people at that time wasn't enough.
Was enough.
Get it to keep it going.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So the thing that I love about the design sprint is obviously from a surface level, it's like, okay, cool, it's gonna like lead to an outcome, right? But the key piece of the design sprint is actually the involvement of the non-designers, right? So the transparency piece is key there, because in order for you to like fully understand your problem for a company, you actually need the insight of every other person, right? So for me at Lattice, like I can't design the best version of Lattice without understanding our pricing model, which is owned by sales. I can't understand everything about design without understanding our go-to-market strategy or how we phrase ourselves to our customers, which is owned by marketing, right? And you know, when you're the only designer, it's actually the easiest time to get other people to buy in because you're not actually competing with any other designer on your team. You're the only person, so everyone's looking at you, right? And something I would actually suggest to everyone in the audience, whether it's the design sprint or just your next project, like pull other people inside the room. Maybe it's a whiteboard, maybe it's over lunch, maybe it's on the way to get coffee or whatever it is. Daniel Burke in his episode talks about design being used as a scientific method, right? And he talks about this concept of actually going to people in your organization and asking them, hey, how would you make the company better, right? Everyone actually has an idea inside the organization of what they would change if they were in that position, right? And you can take that little seed you can take that little seed and inspire, right? Whether it's through designing a prototype or whatever it is, but you're involving that person. When that person is involved, they're bought in. When that person's bought in, they become a sponsor. And when you try and push that thing forward now, the company actually wants to do it. And if you do it well and it makes a business impact, the company will value design.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you guys being here. So those that didn't raise their hand earlier, go watch high resolution video series. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.